When they asked for numbers, the detention cell hummed with the constant vibration of the massive Zephyrian prison ship. Commander Sarah Chen sat perfectly still in the adaptive restraint chair, her hands bound by energy shackles that pulsed with a soft blue glow. She had been conscious for 6 hours since her capture, and in that time, not a single muscle in her face had betrayed fear or concern. The Zephyrians found this disturbing. Her captors were elegant creatures, standing nearly 8 feet tall with silvery skin that seemed to shimmer like mercury. Their elongated heads housed large, dark eyes that missed nothing, and their movements carried the fluid grace of apex predators. They wore flowing robes embedded with technology that shifted and pulsed with their emotional states. Commander Vextar entered the chamber with measured steps. His robes displayed patterns of deep purple and gold, marking his high rank within the Zephyrian Empire's military hierarchy. He carried himself with the confidence of someone accustomed to breaking prisoners through psychological pressure alone. "Human," Vextar said, his voice melodic despite the universal translator's mechanical overlay. "You have been silent for too long." Sarah looked up at him with steady brown eyes. "I've been waiting for you to ask the right questions." The response caught Vextar off guard. Most prisoners began talking the moment he entered, desperate to bargain or plead. This human sat like she was attending a casual meeting. "Your vessel was conducting reconnaissance in restricted Zephyrian space," Vextar continued, circling her chair slowly. "Your crew is dead. You are alone, yet you show no distress." "Should I?" Sarah asked simply. Vextar paused in his circling. "Perhaps you do not understand your situation. The Zephyrian Empire does not negotiate with trespassers. Your species has violated our territorial boundaries repeatedly. We require information about human military capabilities." Sarah nodded as if this was perfectly reasonable. "What would you like to know?" The casual compliance was so unexpected that Vextar hesitated. He had prepared for defiance, for bargaining, even for the emotional breakdown that usually followed the realization of capture. This calm acceptance felt wrong. "Your military designation and combat history," Vextar said finally. "Commander Sarah Chen, Terran Federation Navy, Service Number 4479. I've been in active combat operations for 12 years. And your termination records?" Sarah tilted her head slightly. "My what? How many enemy combatants have you personally eliminated in battle?" Vextar clarified, settling into the chair. Across from her, "We require this information to assess your value as a prisoner and the threat level your species represents." For the first time since her capture, Sarah smiled. It was not a pleasant expression. "You want my kill count?" "Yes." Sarah was quiet for a long moment, and when she spoke again, her voice carried a weight that made the air in the chamber feel heavier. "Are you sure you want that number, Commander Vextar? I insist upon it." Sarah leaned forward as much as the restraints allowed. 2,437 confirmed kills. Estimated additional casualties from tactical operations I directed, 18,600. The silence that followed was profound. Vextar's elegant features went completely still, his robes shifting to a pale, shocked white. Behind him, the 2 guards who had been standing motionless suddenly straightened, their own ceremonial colors flickering uncertainly. "That is impossible," Vextar whispered. "You asked for the truth," Sarah said quietly. "Would you like me to break it down by engagement?" Vextar stood abruptly, his robes now cycling through rapid patterns of deep red and orange. No Zephyrian warrior claims more than 300 kills in a lifetime of service. Our greatest heroes achieve perhaps 500. You claim to have killed more than 20,000 beings. I didn't claim it, Sarah corrected. I stated it as fact. The guards exchanged glances, their translator units working overtime as they chittered rapidly in their native language. One of them approached Vextar and whispered urgently in his ear. Vextar's expression shifted from disbelief to something approaching alarm. My aide informs me that such numbers would trigger certain protocols in our military database. Ancient warnings about species that wage total war. Smart aide, Sarah observed. Explain these numbers, Vextar demanded, his composure cracking. What kind of warfare produces such casualties? Sarah leaned back in her chair, and for a moment, her eyes seemed to look through the walls of the ship, seeing something far beyond the present moment. The Centauri War, she said softly. 3 years of fighting against the Hegemon Collective. They wanted to harvest our colonies for genetic material. They saw humans as livestock. The chamber's lighting seemed to dim as Sarah continued. I commanded the 4th Deep Strike Squadron, 36 ships, 1,800 crew members. Our job was to hit Hegemon supply lines, destroy their forward bases, and eliminate their command structure wherever we found it. Vextar had returned to his seat, but he perched on the edge, clearly agitated. 36 ships could not account for such destruction. You're right, Sarah agreed. 36 ships couldn't. But humans don't fight like other species, Commander. When something threatens our survival, we don't just send soldiers. We become soldiers. Every human becomes a weapon. One of the guards made a sound that the translator rendered as distressed keening. The Battle of Kepler 442 was my first major engagement, Sarah continued, her voice taking on the cadence of a military briefing. The Hegemon had taken the entire system, enslaved the colonists. My squadron was supposed to conduct reconnaissance and report back. But you did not, Vextar said. It wasn't a question. We found mass graves, Sarah said simply. 3 million colonists. Men, women, children. The Hegemon had been using them for biological experiments. The temperature in the chamber seemed to drop. Sarah's eyes hardened to the consistency of steel. So we didn't report back. We attacked 36 ships against an entire system defense. Network 36 ships with nothing left to lose and everything to protect, Sarah corrected. We spent 6 months in that system, Commander. We didn't leave until every Hegemon facility was burning wreckage. Every supply depot, every command post, every ship that couldn't retreat fast enough. Vextar's robes had settled into a deep, troubled blue. The casualties, 47,000 Hegemon forces eliminated in the Kepler campaign alone, Sarah said. But that was just the beginning. She shifted in her restraints, and the energy shackles flickered, responding to some unknown change in her biohithm. The Hegemon sent reinforcements, 80 ships, their finest commanders. They wanted to make an example of the human forces that had dared to resist them. What happened? Sarah's smile returned, cold and sharp as winter steel. We taught them. What happens when you threaten a human colony? The guards had moved closer now, drawn by some primal fascination with Sarah's account. Even the ship's AI seemed to be listening, adjusting the chamber's acoustics to capture every word. Asterisk, the Battle of the Broken Chain lasted 8 days, Sarah continued. The Hegemon had numbers, superior technology, better shields, faster ships. They should have won easily, but they did not. They didn't understand what they were fighting, Sarah said. The Hegemon saw war as conquest, as domination. Clean, efficient, civilized. But when you threaten human families, human children, human homes, war stops being civilized. Vexter leaned forward despite himself. What do you mean, we used their own technology against them, captured their ships, and turned them into weapons? We studied their tactics and found ways to make their strengths into weaknesses. We didn't just fight their military commander, we fought their entire war machine. The energy shackles flickered again, more pronounced this time. By the third day, we were boarding their command vessels. By the fifth day, we were using their own captured ships to attack their supply lines. By the seventh day, their fleet was in full retreat, and the casualties. Sarah met his gaze directly. 11,400 hegemon forces eliminated over those 8 days. My squadron lost 14 ships and 600 crew members. The mathematics of it hit Vextar like a physical blow. You achieved nearly 22-1 casualty ratios against a superior force. We achieved victory, Sarah said quietly. Everything else was just statistics. Suddenly, the chamber's emergency lighting activated, bathing everything in pulsing red. An alarm began sounding throughout the ship, its tone deep and urgent. One of the guards rushed to a wall panel, reading information that scrolled across its surface in rapid Zephyrian script. When he turned back to Vextar, his ceremonial colors had shifted to the pale yellow of fear. "Commander," the guard said, his voice tight with anxiety, "the prisoner's combat record has been verified through our intelligence networks. The numbers are accurate." Vextar stood slowly, his elegant composure finally cracking completely. Verified how? Cross-referenced with Hegemon Collective Archives, sir, and with 17 other species, military databases. The guard's voice dropped to a whisper. "Sir, there are warnings about this individual, specifically in 12 different languages." Sarah watched Vextar's face cycle through a range of expressions before settling on something that looked very much like dawning horror. "You're beginning to understand," she said softly. "The alarm's commander," the second guard interrupted urgently. "Long-range sensors have detected multiple human vessels approaching this sector. Large formations, sir, very large." Sarah closed her eyes and took a deep breath, as if savoring a pleasant aroma. "Right on schedule." Vextar stared at her. "Schedule? Did you really think the Terran Federation would let one of their deep reconnaissance commanders disappear without a response?" Sarah asked, opening her eyes to look at him with something that might have been pity. "I wasn't conducting surveillance, Commander Vextar. I was bait." The implications hit the Zephyrian officer like a cascade of ice water. "Bait for what?" "To draw your forces into one location. To make you reveal your numbers, your tactics, your capabilities." Sarah's voice remained calm, but now it carried an undertone of steel. "To give my people a target worthy of their attention." The chamber door opened with a sharp hiss, and another Zephyrian entered. This one was taller than the others, more heavily built, wearing robes that shifted through patterns of deep authority. The newcomer's presence seemed to command immediate attention from everyone in the room. "High Inquisitor Kethma Vextar said, standing and bowing formally. "I did not expect you personally." The High Inquisitor's large, dark eyes fixed on Sarah with an intensity that seemed to weigh and measure everything about her. When he spoke, his voice carried the authority of someone accustomed to absolute obedience. "Commander Vextar, you will step aside. This interrogation now falls under my direct authority." As Vextar moved away from the chair, Kethma approached Sarah with slow, deliberate steps. His robes displayed patterns she had never seen before. Deep purples and golds shot through with silver threads that seemed to move independently. "Commander Sarah Chen," Kethma said, settling into the chair across from her. "Your reputation precedes you." Sarah studied this new interrogator with renewed interest. "Does it? The ghost of Kepler, the butcher of the broken chain, the architect of the Centauri cleanse." Each title fell from Kethma's lips like a stone dropping into still water. "Yes, your reputation precedes you indeed." For the first time since her capture, Sarah felt a flicker of genuine surprise. "You know those names. The Zephyrian Empire has been watching humanity for some time, Commander. Your species has become notable in certain circles. What humans call War High Inquisitor." Kethma gestured, and the two guards immediately left the chamber. Even Commander Vextar withdrew to a corner, clearly understanding that he was now observing rather than participating. "We need to discuss what you people call warfare," Kethma said without preamble. Sarah raised an eyebrow. "What would you like to know?" "Everything." Kethma leaned back in his chair, his robes settling into steady patterns of deep contemplation. "Your species has achieved casualty ratios that our military strategists consider mathematically impossible. You wage conflicts in ways that violate every established principle of civilized warfare." "Civilized warfare," Sarah repeated thoughtfully. "That's an interesting phrase. Among the member species of the Galactic Concordat, warfare follows established protocols. Combat is between military forces. Civilians are protected. Infrastructure is preserved when possible. Victory is achieved through strategic superiority, not through destruction." Sarah nodded slowly. "And how's that working out for everyone?" The question seemed to puzzle Kethma. "Working out? Wars end quickly with minimal casualties." "Well, no. Conflicts can span decades, sometimes centuries. The Aldorian Vex conflict has been ongoing for 97 years. 97 years, Sarah said softly. "How many have died in that time?" "Perhaps 12 million military personnel from both sides." Sarah was quiet for a long moment. "The Centauri War lasted 3 years and 4 months. Total human casualties, 4.2 million. Total enemy casualties, 47 million. Kethma's robes flickered with disturbed patterns. "You see this as superior." "I see it as decisive," Sarah replied. "When someone threatens our survival, we don't want a long, drawn-out conflict. We want the threat eliminated completely, permanently, and with absolute certainty that it will never return. This is what disturbs the Concordat about your species," Kethma said. "You do not wage war, you wage extinction. Only when necessary." "Define necessary." Sarah leaned forward, and the energy shackles flickered again, more pronounced than before. "When someone tries to wipe out our colonies, when they target our families, when they make it clear that coexistence isn't possible." The Hegemon Collective made such threats. The Hegemon Collective turned human children into experimental subjects, Sarah said, her voice dropping to a whisper that somehow carried more menace than any shout. "They harvested human genetic material for their breeding programs. They used human colonists as slave labor in conditions designed to maximize suffering." Kethma's large eyes had grown even larger, and this justified total war. This made total war inevitable. The High Inquisitor stood and began pacing, his robes shifting, through complex patterns of deep thought. "Explain total war as humans practice it." "Total war means every resource, every citizen, Every available tool is directed to war, defeating the enemy, Sarah said. It means we don't just fight their military. We fight their ability to make war at all. Their infrastructure, their supply lines, their industrial capacity, their communication networks, their ability to feed their population or fuel their ships. Kethma stopped pacing. Their civilian population. Sarah's expression hardened. Anyone who contributes to the war effort becomes a legitimate target. Factory workers producing weapons, engineers maintaining ships, administrators coordinating supply chains. This violates every principle of civilized warfare. This ends wars, Sarah countered. When an enemy realizes that continuing to fight means watching their entire civilization burn, they tend to surrender quickly, or they fight even harder. Sarah smiled grimly. Then we make sure they can't. Kethma returned to his chair, his robes now displaying patterns of deep concern mixed with fascination. Walk me through a specific engagement. The Battle of Proxima Secundus. Sarah's eyes sharpened. You've done your homework. The hegemon established a fortress system there. 50,000 military personnel, advanced defensive systems, supply depots for their entire eastern fleet. Correct. Your forces numbered 8,000. Also correct. You achieved complete victory in 17 days with minimal human casualties. 437 human KIA, Sarah confirmed. But you're missing the important part, which is, we didn't just defeat their military forces. We eliminated their ability to use that system for anything ever again. Kethma consulted a datapad that materialized from his robes. According to hegemon records, Proxima Secundus was rendered uninhabitable for approximately 400 years due to industrial contamination. Intentional industrial contamination, Sarah corrected. We didn't just blow up their factories. We made sure the materials they were producing would poison the entire system if anyone tried to rebuild. The High Inquisitor was quiet for a long time. When he spoke again, his voice carried a note of something that might have been fear. You turned their own industrial capacity into a weapon against them. We turned everything into a weapon against them, Sarah said. Their factories became environmental disasters. Their communication networks became vectors for psychological warfare. Their supply ships became guided missiles aimed at their own facilities. How? Sarah settled back in her chair, and for a moment she looked almost relaxed. Humans are very good at repurposing things, High Inquisitor. We're especially good at finding ways to make enemy equipment work for us instead of against us. Give me specifics. Archie Proxima Secundus, we captured 3 hegemon supply vessels intact. Each one was loaded with industrial chemicals meant to sustain their manufacturing base. Kethma waited. We reprogrammed their navigation systems to deliver those chemicals to hegemon facilities throughout the system. But we modified the cargo. Modified how? Chemical weapons, Sarah said simply. We turned their own industrial supplies into aerosol toxins that would be released automatically when the cargo holds opened. The silence in the chamber was complete. Even the ship's background hums seemed to fade. 50,000 military personnel, Kethma said finally. Eliminated over a period of 6 days, Sarah confirmed. They couldn't understand why their own supply ships were killing them. By the time they figured it out, we'd already reprogrammed their entire logistics network. This is not warfare, Kethma said, his robes now cycling through patterns of deep disturbance. This is systematic annihilation. This is what happens when you threaten human colonies, Sarah said quietly. We tried diplomacy first. We offered the hegemon multiple opportunities to withdraw from human space peacefully. They refused. They responded by accelerating their harvest operations. More colonies destroyed, more families murdered. Sarah's voice remained calm, but something in her eyes had gone very cold. So we showed them what humans do when diplomacy fails. Kethma stood abruptly and walked to the chamber's viewport. Outside, the stars wheeled slowly as the prison ship continued its course through space. "Your species terrifies the galactic concordat," he said without turning around. "Good." The blunt response made him turn back to face her. "Good. Fear prevents mistakes," Sarah explained. "If other species understand that attacking humanity carries consequences, they can't survive. They won't attack humanity. But at what cost? Your methods violate every established principle of interstellar law." Sarah tilted her head. "Whose laws?" "The Galactic Concordat's laws. The principles that have maintained peace between civilized species for millennia." "Peace for whom?" Sarah asked. "The Concordat didn't intervene when the hegemon started harvesting human colonies. You didn't offer assistance when we requested help through diplomatic channels. The Concordat's laws only seemed to apply when we started winning." Kethma's robes shifted to troubled patterns. "The Concordat operates on principles of non-interference in bilateral conflicts." "Convenient principles," Sarah observed. "Tell me, High Inquisitor, how many Concordat species have been completely eliminated by hostile forces in the last 1,000 years?" "Eliminated? None, of course. Such outcomes are prevented by the protocols of civilized warfare. And how many? Human colonies were eliminated by the hegemon before we started fighting back." Kethma consulted his datapad. 47 colonies. Total population approximately 15 million. 15 million people, Sarah said softly. Men, women, children. Families wiped out because they were inconvenient to someone else's expansion plans. She leaned forward again, and this time the energy shackles flickered so violently that warning lights began blinking on the control panel. "So when you talk about the cost of our methods, remember that we paid a much higher cost when we tried to follow your civilized rules." The chamber door hissed open, and one of the guards entered quickly. He approached Kethma and whispered urgently in the flowing language of the Zephyrians. Kethma's expression shifted from troubled to alarmed. "How many ships?" The guard's response was longer, more detailed. With each word, Kethma's robes grew paler. "Commander Chen," Kethma said, turning back to Sarah, "our sensors have detected a human fleet approaching this position. 347 vessels. Sounds about right," Sarah said casually. "This prison ship contains 40,000 Zephyrian personnel. We are not a military vessel." "I know. Are you telling me that your people would attack a prison ship?" Sarah studied his face for a long moment. "High Inquisitor, let me ask you a question. If 40,000 humans were holding a single Zephyrian prisoner, and that prisoner was someone important to your people, what would your government do?" "We would negotiate, offer prisoner exchanges, seek diplomatic solutions, and if negotiations failed, we would find other diplomatic channels." Sarah nodded. "That's the difference between us. When negotiations fail and someone we care about is in danger, we don't look for more diplomats. What do you look for? More firepower." The guard spoke. Again, more urgently this time. Kethma's robes were now cycling through patterns of barely controlled panic. "The lead human vessel is transmitting a message," Kethma said. "They are demanding your immediate release." "They're not demanding," Sarah corrected. "They're informing you of what's going to happen. We could negotiate terms." "You could," Sarah agreed. But you won't. Why not? Because this isn't really about rescuing me, Sarah said quietly. This is about demonstrating to the galaxy what happens when someone takes a human prisoner without permission. The ship shuddered slightly, and new alarms began sounding throughout the vessel. What was? The Kethma demanded. The guard's response was rapid, frightened. Kethma's robes went completely white. They've disabled our engines, he said faintly. Boarding parties will be arriving shortly, Sarah said conversationally. I'd recommend you start thinking about surrender terms. This is a violation of every principle of space law. This is what humans call a rescue operation, Sarah replied, though I suspect your people will call it something else. The chamber shuddered again, more violently this time. Through the viewport, Kethma could see the sleek forms of human assault craft approaching the prison ship's docking bays. Your fleet will be destroyed if they attempt to board, he said desperately. Sarah's smile was sharp and predatory. Hi, Inquisitor, do you remember what I told your subordinate about casualty ratios? Yes, those weren't statistics from a war we lost. The lights in the chamber flickered as the prison ship's power systems fluctuated. In the distance, the sound of cutting tools could be heard working through the outer hull. How many boarding parties, Kethma? Asked the guard. The response made his robes shift to patterns of pure terror. 87 simultaneous breach points. He whispered. Sarah closed her eyes and listened to the distant sounds of her people coming to get her. Like I said, High Inquisitor, when someone we care about is in danger, we don't look for more diplomats. The cutting sounds grew closer, accompanied by the distinctive whine of human plasma weapons warming up. We look for more firepower. The energy shackles around Sarah's wrists flickered one final time, then died completely as the prison ship's power systems were systematically disabled by the boarding parties. She stood up slowly, working feeling back into her hands. Now, she said to the terrified Zephyrian officials, let's discuss what happens next.